Alright guys, welcome back to a brand new Infinity N5 initial reaction, this time for Svalarheima WinterFor. I fiddled with Svalarheima quite a lot in N4, and was pretty impressed by a lot of what they can bring to the table in great links and great kit. But before we get to see what N5 has to offer us, let's take a look at some context. What defines Sval? Sval was known for their strong and devastating long-range firepower and widespread mimetism in visors. If a Svalarheima unit was engaging you and it had one wound, chances are it had some fantastic kit that was ignoring whatever you were doing to it and was putting you at some kind of disadvantage. This meant that when Sval took a gunfight, it was always on their terms, and they were usually pretty heavily favored. They also had pretty excellent close assault in Liang Kai, the Beast Hunter, and to a lesser extent Shona Carano, and it was something relatively unique where that close assault was also pretty fast among the Pan-Oceanian sectorials. You also had pretty efficient movement, where you had two Harris teams, and a lot of movement skills like Super Jump and Climbing Plus, mainly Climbing Plus. Unfortunately, your best gunfighters outside of the tag are one wound, and your multi-wound gunfighters didn't tend to have those visors or mimetism, so you sort of had a back and forth. You were either getting that visor or that mim, or you were getting something with two wounds, so you could never really have it all. They also had zero obfuscation in their lists. They didn't have any marker states, any drop troops, any hidden deployment, anything like that. What you saw was what you got when you came up against Svalarheima. Now in N4, Svalarheima performed fairly consistently through the addition as a solid sectorial. They're quite powerful and consistently quite powerful. This is somewhat due to the simplicity of their play style and how lean a lot of their profiles were, where you weren't trying to do anything fancy, and you were often able just to beat opponents on efficiency and well-executed planning. Through the addition, Svalarheima also got some really nice additional models, like the Beast Hunter, which added to that brilliant close assault, and also the Blade Op, who really changed the kinds of lists you could build with Svalarheima and really pumped how efficient they were to 11 with the huge prevalence of tactical awareness. Alright, now that we've understood where we're coming from, let's find out where we're going. Alright folks, and here we are in Infinity Army 7 with Svalarheima WinterFor. We've got unlimited duos, we've still got the two Harrises, which is fantastic, and the core. The fire team's chart has changed a decent bit. We've got Hawkins with the Fusilier tag here now, as well as Orcs in the Fusilier team, which I don't recall from N4. Could be wrong there though. You can see CaRu are here, and that's because they've lost their wildcard status, which is a bit of a weird one. It only affects the Nice fire team, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then we've got Octavia here in the Fusilier team as well. She's had a bit of a rework, and we'll get to her when she comes. Next, the Nice fire team hasn't really changed much at all. I think the Machinist keeping that Nice keyword, that's going to be a much bigger deal in N5 than N4. We've got the WinterFor alpha team, which hasn't changed much at all either. Neither have the beta teams, or the Bulletier teams really, but what has changed here is your wild cards, where you have the addition of Hannibal and the Valkyrie, but you've lost the Blade Ops as a linkable option, which is a pretty big change. Hannibal and Valkyrie both have the WinterFor alpha team tag, which is your Orc and Varg fire teams. Additionally, Gunnar has also gained the CaRu tag, which he didn't have previously, which is nice for the WinterFor beta fire teams. So there is actually a relative amount of movement in the fire team's chart compared to some of the other fire team's charts I've reviewed. Now, saying that, let's hop into some profiles. The Humble Fusiliers haven't changed a whole lot. Some of their SWIC options have become a teeny bit cheaper points-wise, but where you're going to see the biggest change is them now being capped at Ballistics 13 with the fire team's changes. Before, you used to just take a pretty nice core of just Fusiliers. What I can foresee happening now is maybe putting 4 Fusiliers together and a CaRu in front to pop off that ARO presence, where you'll be getting that CaRu up to Ballistic Skill 14. That was something you could do in N4, but sort of lost out on the value of having that really cheap pure Fusilier team that performed similarly. So Fusiliers sort of nerfed just by how the fire team changes have worked out, but with the general power level of the game going down a bit, I wouldn't be surprised if a pure team of these guys is still quite solid. That'll just have to be seen. Next is the Knock, which I think is maybe one of the biggest losers in this edition change in Svalarheima. He stayed pretty much the same except for the Bag Bomb. So the Bag Bomb is something new. The Bag Bomb says when you're targeted with an attack by an enemy model that isn't a template, you get that addition to your dodge. It doesn't affect your dodge otherwise, which is a bit of a shame. You've kept all of your profiles from last edition. I especially like the Boarding Shotgun +1 Burst and Panzerfaust. You've got some small changes with the +1 Burst profiles, probably due to the shotgun changes. These guys are still going to face-to-face okay, but they don't really have the weapons for it. The Spitfire is interesting, but still, you didn't see it last edition, you don't see it now. I think the big differences with these guys is they're now competing much more with the Locusts, who we might skip to now. So the Locusts have gotten a bit of a glow up. You can see they got the Bag Bomb as well. But the big deal here is the Camouflage 1 use. Now, Nakamura is really vulnerable in that they didn't have any camouflage. It was the same with the Locusts, who are also infiltrating deeper than the Knock and have the same level of mim, which is going to apply to that camouflage. I think basically where there used to be a bit of contention in N4, but the Knock would usually win out, I think the Locust is the clear winner here. It's still got the same killer, hacker, and hacker profiles. The Wild Parrot's nice, and if you do want a gunfighter, like the Spitfire, I think the Locust Multi-Marksman is pretty solid with that multi-ammo type. I think essentially the Knock have lost the war. Onto the Blade Up now, which is a bit of a shame. They haven't actually changed too much in their profiles, except for the decoy with the forward deployment and the emitter, which is a really interesting weapon. It's essentially a Thunderbolt, but EM. It's really interesting, but not being able to link anymore is a massive deal. You used to be able to put together crazy duos of a Bulleteer and a Blade, or a Bjorg Mach 12 and a Blade, but you can't really do that anymore. I think if you are going to see the Blade, which you honestly might not, I think you'll end up seeing this forward deployment engineering profile with the decoys. It's a big shame. I thought the Blade Ops brought a really different kind of list to Svalarheima that was fun and highly effective. So seeing them lose their link ability, I think, is a huge hit to the faction. Trauma Docs are here. They're fine. They can't link. Machinists are here, and they have changed quite a bit. They've got a lot of new profiles. You had this breakdown between the WinterFor and the Machinist in N4 anyway, where the Machinist got Mim. That Mim actually made them into a decent last resort gunfighter, where Ballistic Skill 12 and Mim -3 is a pretty good gunfighting standard in something like Ariadna or Hak-Islam. But where they've really changed is with the deployable cover and the armed turret profiles. This is something new to most engineers in the game. Deployable Cover puts out a little piece of scenery terrain, which is nice, but I think the real money is in the armed turret profile. It's unfortunate there's no mine layer or anything, so you are going to have to spend an order or half an order to put it out. Could be nice if, when they're in a link with the Nice, if you got an extra half an order, I guess you can pop it out, but I'm not sure if you want to pay the extra points for that. Next up, we've got the Techb, who has also had a pretty significant change. For one, she's no longer a regular, and is now your faction's tag comm. Tag comm functions essentially like Rem Driver, but for tags, where if you take the Techb, you're going to get the bonus listed here, being Dodge +3 and Gizmo Kit +1 Fizz. This is really nice in Pano, where you have a pretty high Gizmo Kit rating anyway, so that +1 is a nice little cherry on top. I'm not sure what the Yodom's dodging on. Some other tags in Pano have got quite good dodges, but I don't think the Yodom is quite up to that level. Yeah, he's still only dodging on an 11. So going up to a dodge 14, that's pretty nice. So I expect to see the Techb in most of your lists where you're taking a tag. To some extent, it's a bit of a shame it's regular now. To some extent, it's nice. It can't link anywhere, which is a bit of a shame. Some of the Nomad ones can link, but still quite solid. Alright, and here is one of our new units. Hannibal Mercenary Team Leader. This guy has been brought in from the now defunct Forco, and brings Chain of Command to the table. He's only BS 12, which isn't fantastic, but he dodges okay, and that no wound incapacitation with a boarding shotgun and nanopulsar means you can essentially trade with a model pretty well, where you can both put a wound on each other, but you come out the other side. He's not a great shot, so the multi-marksman rifle isn't something I'm really drawn to. The Chain of Command strategic deployment, or just the Chain of Command, is where I'd go if I were to take him, and that is a big if. Chain of Command isn't something you necessarily want or need in Svalarheima. You could take it in a Yodom list if you're really worried about your Yodom, but look, at that point, if your Yodom dies, the game's probably over anyway. The strategic deployment is cool, especially where they fit in with the Varg team, with that K1 marksman rifle. Getting that forward deployment's really nice. Unfortunately, it doesn't have super jump or anything like that, so I really don't know where Hannibal's going to fit in. I think he's fun just to have in the faction as a weird little flex piece with some utility, but I don't expect him to be a big player. Alright, Richard Quinn has gotten quite a nice upgrade. He's gotten a multi-marksman rifle over his old shock marksman rifle, and has got Warhorse. Warhorse is the new veteran skill, which means that, for one, it has all the veteran bonuses, but also you don't suffer the negatives of BS attack -3, which we've seen on a few models like the Prime and the Kriza Borak. MSV1's really nice. He's kept the ballistic skill 13. He's also got a boarding pistol +1 burst, which when it hits the target, it puts down a blast template, like a boarding shotgun. That's where the naming convention comes from, which is a pretty cool piece of kit. He has gone up a little bit in points to reflect, I'd say, mostly the multi on the marksman. You would take him occasionally. Svalarheima is a pretty easy faction to max out on your Swick with. Yeah, and he does have some okay keywords. The Fusilier keyword's pretty nice. You can slot him in with your missile launcher team when that missile launcher goes down as a cheap backup gun who will still be ballistic skill 14. That's pretty solid. Whether or not your lists will be able to fit that, I'm not sure, but he's definitely better than he used to be, I think. Alright, Octavia Grim's daughter. She's had a bit of a rework. Unfortunately, I still don't really think it's enough. She's got BS attack +1 burst and a new missile launcher. Sorry, a new heavy rocket launcher profile. But but she's still fairly expensive and only has ballistic skill 12. The only real use case I foresee for her is as the 5th man in a 4-man Fusilier team, where she's going up to BS 13 as a weird side grade to the Fusilier missile launcher. She's quite a bit more expensive, but has Dogged and has a little bit more armor. And BS attack +1 burst means that with a burst 3 missile launcher, sort of like the Bjorg, you can feel comfortable using it in the active turn where you couldn't with a Fusilier. I think that's still just a bit too niche for the amount of points she's costing though. Combat Instinct is nice as an ARO piece. I think that's not something to be discarded, as is the Courage and the Dogged. Whether or not that's worth an extra 10 points on your missile launcher ARO, I'm really not sure, but I'd encourage you to give it a shot. Now I've got Agnes. She hasn't really changed at all. She was okay as sort of a link filler, mainly in the WinterFor fire teams. But where she doesn't have any keyword, I'm not sure if she's still going to carry that sort of role. The Rem Racer was okay. You'd take it sometimes, but you'd more often just take a Fuzzbot if you were taking that Bulleteer and really wanted to get that marksmanship or some kind of buff. I think Agnes is maybe going to take a bit of a step back in the faction, where she doesn't have a keyword and isn't that cheap link glue. But I am a fan of the weapons loadout here with the Nanopulsar. It's pretty nice where we just have less templates in general. Warcore hasn't changed. Infirmer's changed quite a bit. It's gone down pretty significantly in points. And has got a boarding shotgun and a combi rifle. The boarding shotgun's no longer going to have that template, but that's okay. I'm just personally really happy at this points drop. It was always pretty hard to justify putting an Infirmer in a list. I don't think that's the case anymore. And look, at Whip 13, it's a pretty fantastic doctor. I'm looking forward to the Infirmer getting on the table again. The CaRu Special Group. These guys probably define the faction to a lot of people, and I'm happy to report that nothing much has changed. The points are still relatively the same. You've still got all the special sauce you like, where the... Yeah, I mean, look, the fire team bonuses have changed things for you a little bit. You could do quite well to duo the Feuerbach and the paramedic profile. I think that's a pretty potent duo. Or potentially even the Feuerbach with someone like Guna. We'll get to Guna in a bit. I think he's in a bit of a rough state at the moment, but I quite like the paramedic and the Feuerbach. Could even go paramedic, Feuerbach, Guna for a pure Harris to get that discover bonus. That's pretty nasty. But CaRu is still fantastic. You'll still take them in most of your lists. I can see them really capping off a Fusilier team really well with the Feuerbach these days. Yeah, nothing much to say. Now the Nice, I think, are actually sort of winners in the sectorial change. I can see you taking a pure Harris team of a Machinist Nice to cheap out and have a Specialist, a Heavy Machine Gun Nice as your active gunner, and a Multi-Sniper Nice as an Overwatch piece. The MSV2 and Min-3 is a really potent combination, and getting +3 to Discover is really nice on active where you've got Whip 13. But +1 Dodge, putting you up to Fizz 13, I think that's not something to be sniffed at, especially where you've got a decent armor that can shrug off a hit or two. Even if your Nice Sniper does go down in reactive, then being able to pop up with a Nice Heavy Machine Gun and a Machinist Nice, who've maintained that burst bonus, I think is really strong. They've got Climb 8 inches now, which I don't really see affecting much of anything, and they have lost a few profiles, but nothing to write home about. I think the Hacker and the Paramedic are still probably too expensive to consider taking, especially where the Machinist is cheaper, and potentially has some added utility depending on what profile you take. I would really keep an eye on this Svalarheima Nice Pure Harris, and definitely give it a shot. I think it's going to be really powerful in this edition. Also really powerful in this edition, huge glow up for the Varer Maximum Security team. and there's two major changes to talk about with them. The first one is albedo. Albedo rule has been changed now that you have albedo and a number in brackets, where that number now acts as a mimetism for visors and marksmanship. So if your Vargur was to shoot at something like a bolt, the bolt would be shooting back starting at a -6. Incredibly strong. The second thing is the super jump change. It doesn't really affect the Vargur as such, but jumping is now just a flat 6 inches. But now we go down to the profiles, and they're looking really nice. The K1 Marksman's still there and was an absolute breadwinner. The heavy rocket launcher's there if you need that longer range weapon. And here we've got the combi rifle, heavy flamethrower, flash pulse, forward observer, deactivator, disco baller. And that's a huge mouthful to say, but what it means is you have a specialist with a non-template weapon and a template weapon and a disco baller. So a disco baller is a new piece of kit that you shoot out similar to the N4 pitcher. Where it lands, you put down a little token, and it puts out an eclipse zone, centering on that token. During the states phase, that disco baller turns off, and that eclipse marker goes away, but it leaves the disco baller marker itself, which can be reactivated with the deactivator. Having this is absolutely huge in Pano, where before you had no way to break line of sight. I'm expecting the Vargur to be taken actually quite highly now. You can duo, say, the Vargur disco baller and the Vargur heavy rocket launcher really well, where the heavy rocket launcher gets that bonus, has that albedo, they can super jump around together. I think that's going to be incredibly strong, and you really got to get the Vargur on the table. I don't really see them going with the Orcs too much, unless you were to go, say, the K1 Marksman rifle, the disco baller, and maybe an Orc Feuerbach as an ARO piece. Hannibal and Valkyrie also have the WinterFor tag, and we might skip to Valkyrie now to see what she has to offer. So Valkyrie is another character that's come over from the defunct Forco, and she's pretty good. She's got Berserk +3, and it's important to note that Berserk is now a face-to-face roll. You still get that extra movement bonus, but you don't get to ignore the face-to-face. She's got quite a good martial arts level, a good CC score, and that Berserk +3. So I think she's going to be winning that face-to-face quite often, especially with how martial arts has changed. She has immunity enhanced, which is the new total immunity, natural born warrior, no wound incapacitation, and has had an enormous points drop. This heavy shotgun used to be in the mid to high 30s. The multi-rifle hasn't changed too much, where I'm really gravitating towards this heavy shotgun. The high phase with the grenades is really nice. She adds another fantastic close combat element to Svalarheima, and she could fit in quite well in a duo with an Orc or a Varg. I could see taking the Varg K1 combi rifle and the Valkyrie, or that little heavy rocket launcher and disco baller, and then tacking the heavy shotgun onto the end. It's going to be really nice too. I'm pretty excited to see what Valkyrie can do, and I think she's a really good addition to the faction, where Hannibal was a bit more disappointing. Alright, Uma Swornson has gone through a fair bit of changes and a bit of a points drop, but I still don't think it's enough that you're going to see her an incredible amount. She's picked up Combat Instinct and an X-Visor on some of her profiles, but I still don't really see it being enough to where you want to take her consistently in any lists. She does have the Nice tag, but I don't think a Nice pure core is worth it in N5, where it wasn't even really worth it in N4. She has the Fusilier tag, which is somewhat nice, but I don't know, she's going to be stuck in your deployment zone. I think they've done a few bits and bobs to Uma to try and make her a bit better. I still don't think she's really that playable. Next, we've got Shona, who's, I think, looking really well. Shona can easily slot in with, say, that Varg team now that she's gotten a bit better. Sorry, now that the Varg have gotten a bit better, you can take the heavy rocket launcher, Disco Baller, and Shona, and I think that's a really fantastic Harris. She's still the hardest hitting melee option in the game, able to just one-tap a tag with that fantastic AP and explosive melee weapon. Going down in points, I think she's fantastic. You might even see her a bit more due to that points drop, and I'm particularly excited to see what she can do with that Varg team. Alright, and here we've got Guna. Guna is still plagued by some of the problems he had in N4. He's kept his tactical awareness, which is really nice. He's kept his specialist operative. And Berserk being face-to-face, I think is a buff for him, where he only has that one wound and doesn't have dogged or no wound incapacitation. Looking at his profiles, he has a new forward deployment 8 inches decoy profile. At 29 points, I think it's still... I think it's too much, especially where it's only a specialist operative without a specific skill to get any mission bonuses. I still think the FTO is pretty nice, especially where it's picked up the CaRu keyword. I could see you duoing him with a CaRu pretty well. I don't know if I'd really be putting him into any teams past that. He did get that points drop. He might still be a bit too expensive. I did use him pretty consistently in N4, but we'll just have to see how things shake out with him in N5. Now the Bjorg, here's another model who got a pretty cool glow up. I was a Bjorg fan in N4, I'll say that now. I really liked the active turn capabilities with the missile launcher, and the Mach 12 duoed with a blade op was fantastic. We can see he's picked up albedo -6, which is absolutely brilliant, as well as an X-Visor, which is less brilliant. He hasn't really gone down that much in points to reflect some of these changes, but I still think he's pretty great. The big deal is the Disco Baller. Him and the Varg both have a Disco Baller, which can block line of sight really well. Unfortunately, the Bjorg sort of loses a bit in that you don't have a WinterFor beta keyword, meaning that to get that Burst 3 missile launcher or to put that missile launcher up in ARO, I think's a bit difficult. You could just try and ride off of having that BS-14, or you could take cheaper options, maybe 2 CaRus, maybe a CaRu 4-buck and a CaRu paramedic to give that extra die to the missile launcher in active and reactive. I'm just not sure if that's going to be worth it. I could see you maybe putting it in a Knight Hospitaller duo, making that a Harris, where the Knight Hospitallers have gone down a bit, but we'll get to that a bit later. The Mach 12, I think, is still a winner. You can run that solo pretty well. I don't know how much use you're going to get out of that X-Visor, but the Disco Baller is fantastic. I think the Bjorg is pretty attractive now. I just don't know if his link options are there, and if him not going down in points is going to have an impact. The albedo is really nice though, and so is the Disco Baller. Off the cuff, in terms of Disco Baller, I might favor the Varg, but I could see taking both in a list. It's the Orcs. They've gone down in points. They've gained a few more WinterFor profiles, but nothing revolutionary. It's still just kind of multi-rifle range band profiles and a shotgun. It's pretty sad to see the Varuna Division Orcs go. With stealth, they were a pretty good go-to option. I don't really know if you're going to see Orcs much in Svalarheima. I think you sort of have better options all around, except maybe the Foyabak. I don't know, yeah, even then, I'm not convinced you're going to see these guys much at all in N5 Svalarheima. Yeah. Knight Hospitallers had a bit of a glow-up. You can see they've had a significant points drop. And I'm a big fan of duoing the heavy machine gun with the Doctor to get that +1 burst. You can tack on the Bjorg missile launcher onto that if you want to, though that does start to get pretty expensive. I'm not really sure if they're going to see play in Svalarheima. They did a teeny bit last edition, where you didn't have as much order pressure as you did in military orders. Yeah, I mean, I tend to favor the one wound gunfighter options in Svalarheima, but I can definitely see you pushing up the board with one of these duos. I might prefer the Bjorg Mach 12 with some kind of specialist attached, like the Infirmerer, for that role of pushing up the board, but it remains to be seen. I think they definitely win out over the Orcs either way. If you're tempted to take an Orc, you might just be better off taking the Hospitallers, depending on what else your list is doing. Knight of Justice got a really nice glow up. He got a big points drop, and the Forward Observer and Hackers both got a multi-rifle, which is really nice. I'm a really big fan of the Hacker. I think he was probably your best hacker in Svalarheima in N4, and was a huge staple in missions like Highly Classified. I always felt a bit hesitant, just because he only had that combi rifle, but with that multi-rifle, I don't think I have any hesitations about the Knight of Justice now. It's fantastic. The Spitfire stands out a bit more here than it does in military orders, where Svalarheima doesn't have the Spitfire Club, and that can duo pretty nicely. Potentially, well, I guess you can't with an Infirmer. I can see it having some nice duos. I can see you using that forward deployment option as well. It's a shame you have that extra half swick on the forward deployment option when compared to military orders, but the Knight of Justice is looking incredibly solid. Kyle Hawkins hasn't changed much at all. He's got Berserk now and Combat Instinct, which means you ignore a surprise attack. I think he's still quite good. He can go with the Fusilier team, but he has the same issue as Quinn does, or, you'd want to push up the board a bit to get work done with that multi-marksman rifle. Whether that's something you end up doing or not, I'm not sure, but he's a pretty cool piece. Alright, then Big Daddy Yodam. Big Daddy Yodam. Nothing's much has changed with him. Those buffs from the Techb are going to be really nice. He's kept his tactical awareness, where some units haven't kept their tactical awareness. And yeah, you've got that great lieutenant profile, got the great non-lieutenant profile. His points haven't gone down as much compared to some of the other tags, but he's still pretty fantastic. The tags all now have new ancillary units, which are essentially deployable models instead of pilots as such. You've got a Whip 12 on that now compared to the old pilot's Whip 11, so that's a bit of a buff. I really like the Yodam. Nothing much has changed. Alright, the Pathfinder bot has gone down a bit and now has a TAC awareness profile, which is really cool. Unfortunately, you can't link it though. That's the one downside, at least in this faction. You've got the new Total Reaction bots who have a Thunderbolt +1 burst option. This is nice where standalone arrow pieces are looking to be more popular due to linked arrows not being as powerful anymore. The Thunderbolt is essentially a burst 2 heavy machine gun. So you're looking at a burst 3 heavy machine gun with the +1 burst. That's a swick less and 5 points less. I can see that being a pretty popular pick, especially with a swick hungry sectorial like Svalarheima. Clipper's here, but has a non-guided +1 burst profile. You can't link it in Sval though, so nothing really to note. You've kept your AVA3 Fugazi drone bots, which is fantastic. The Bulleteer has gained a heavy shotgun +1 burst. You didn't really take the heavy shotgun Bulleteer in Svalarheima anyway, where it's more of a pick in MO, but the Spitfire profile is quite nice. It is a shame you've lost that blade op, because I'm not sure how often you're going to see that Spitfire anymore, but it's nice that it's there. Peacemakers have had a bit of a shake-up. You can now choose a +1 burst option on the shotguns and a regular version with a 1.5 swick to have your Ox bot be a mine layer. You've gained Pulsars, which I think is really valuable considering the shotgun changes, and a nice points drop. I still don't think you're going to see them an incredible amount in Svalarheima, where you don't have as strong a hacking game as the other Pano sectorials, but might come up occasionally. Mulebot hasn't changed, just has a slight points decrease. Verdi touched on the Locust, who I think are a really solid choice for your midfield now. And here we go with the Kunai Solutions Ninja. I think these were pretty unanimously agreed to be one of the worst models in N4 as a whole, where they had a weird point with a really low ballistic skill, but weapons that really wanted to engage. You can see you've got that ballistic skill increase to a 12, with min-6 making that acceptable. You've got camouflage, climbing plus, hidden deployments, martial arts level 3, which is actually quite good martial arts now. Bit disappointing with the shock CC weapon, which is a holdover from last edition. But your question with the Kunai solution is, does it make it worth it to take over something else in terms of gunfighting? I think the only really appealing profile here is maybe the T2 Thunderbolt as a hidden deployment surprise. Even then, it's costing you half a swick. I still don't think these guys are incredibly playable. I think they're funny, but that's not really going to help you. Keeping that shock CC weapon is pretty annoying. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and they can't link with anything. They're not specialists. I just don't think the money's there for them. I think I'd much rather take a Locust for a similar price. Beast Hunters. Beast Hunters stayed the same. You've still got that special Pano only heavy flamethrower +1 burst. Very cool. And then Lian Kai. Lian Kai has changed a little bit, but he's still pretty fantastic. The Berserk is face to face. Lian Kai doesn't like that, I don't think. But his super jump has buffed his movement significantly, where you can super jump for your first order to move 6, and then just run another 4, and that's fantastic. Chain Rifle Light Shotgun combo is really good. He's still got the explosive CC weapon, an absolutely brutal level of martial arts, where you're getting special dice at that level to your martial arts. Yeah, I mean, look, I think overall Lian Kai is probably happy, even though you've lost Berserk. But where does this leave Svalarheima as a sectorial in N5? I think it leaves them in a really strong spot, honestly. They've taken a bit of a hit to the Fusilier Corps, but I think there's some things you can do to work around that, especially with points drops. I think the Varg are absolutely the standout piece in the new edition with the Disco Baller, and I'd be hitting those on the table as soon as possible. This Nice Pure Core, where you can go Machinist, HMG, Multi-Sniper, I think is going to be really valuable. And yeah, I think Valkyrie actually provides a really cool new close assault model. I think overall you could probably count Svalarheima as a winner coming into N5. Yeah, I mean, look, despite the core changes and despite the Blade Op changes, I think you can pretty comfortably call Svalarheima a winner going into N5, where most other factions appear to be losers or staying the same. Svalarheima looks to be really fun. Can't wait to hit the table with him. Thanks again so much for watching, guys. Please like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll catch you soon. Bye-bye.